UBUNTU Contributionism. A Blueprint for Human Prosperity. Exposing the Global Banking Fraud. By Michael Tellinger. Published by Zulu Planet Publishers, South Africa, 2013. Copyright Michael Tellinger 2013. Block 2. The royal banking families did not like this at all, and they used the British Prime Minister, Winston Churchill, as the messenger of things to come. Should Germany do business, again in the next 50 years we have led this war, World War I, in vain. Winston Churchill in the Times, 1919. Germany becomes too powerful. We have to crush it. Winston Churchill, November 1936, speaking to U.S. General Robert E. Wood. We will force this war upon Hitler, if he wants it or not. Winston Churchill, 1936 broadcast. This war is an English war and its goal is the destruction of Germany. Winston Churchill, autumn 1939 broadcast. Churchill makes it clear that World War II could have been avoided, but it made financial sense to engage in a war to conquer sales markets. The war wasn't only about abolishing fascism, but to conquer sales markets. We could have, if we had intended so, prevented this war from breaking out without doing one shot, but we didn't want to. Winston Churchill to Truman, Fulton, USA, March 1946. In the following statement, Churchill admits exactly what the war was about, but at the same time makes a sinister remark that suggests he realized that the bankers were the real culprit who had taken over the control from Hitler. Germany's unforgivable crime before World War II was its attempt to loosen its economy out of the world trade system and to build up an independent exchange system from which the world finance couldn't profit anymore. We butchered the wrong pig. Winston Churchill, The Second World War, Bern, 1960. From 1933, Wall Street bankers had bankrolled the successful coups by both Hitler and Mussolini. Brown Brothers Harriman in New York continued to finance Hitler right up to the day war was declared with Germany, and probably continued the funding in clandestine ways during the war. Although reports claim that there was a fallout between the parties, I cannot imagine any banker shying away from such a lucrative opportunity, as funding a war machine. The bankers decided that a fascist dictatorship in the United States based on the one in Italy would be far better for their business interests than Roosevelt's New Deal, which threatened massive wealth redistribution to recapitalize the working and middle class of America. A sinister plot to overthrow the U.S. government was devised by Wall Street tycoons who recruited General Butler to lead the way by installing a Secretary of General Affairs who would be answerable to Wall Street and not the people. General Butler pretended to go along with the scheme but unexpectedly exposed the plot to Congress. Unfortunately, the Congress was then, as it is now, in the pocket of the Wall Street bankers, who refused to act. Hitler and the Bush family empire. A report in The Guardian, on Saturday, September 25, 2004, gives us an insight into how the Bush family profited and created an empire off the back of Hitler's war machine. Here is an edited version of the article. George Bush's grandfather, the late U.S. Senator Prescott Bush, was a director and shareholder of companies that profited from their involvement with the financial backers of Nazi Germany. The Guardian has obtained confirmation from newly discovered files in the U.S. National Archives that a firm of which Prescott Bush was a director was involved with the financial architects of Nazism. The debate over Prescott Bush's behavior has been bubbling under the surface for some time. But the new documents, many of which were only declassified last year, show that even after America had entered the war and when there was already significant information about the Nazis' plans and policies, he worked for and profited from companies closely involved with the very German businesses that financed Hitler's rise to power. While there is no suggestion that Prescott Bush was sympathetic to the Nazi cause, the documents reveal that the firm he worked for, Brown Brothers Harriman, BBH, acted as a U.S. base for the German industrialist, Fritz Thyssen, who helped finance Hitler in the 1930s before falling out with him at the end of the decade. The Guardian has seen evidence that shows Bush was the director of the New York-based Union Banking Corporation, UBC, that represented Thyssen's U.S. interests, and he continued to work for the bank after America entered the war. Prescott Bush was also on the board of at least one of the companies that formed part of a multinational network of front companies to allow Thyssen to move assets around the world. Thyssen owned the largest steel and coal company in Germany and grew rich from Hitler's efforts to rearm between the two world wars. One of the pillars in Thyssen's international corporate web, UBC, worked exclusively for, and was owned by, a Thyssen-controlled bank in the Netherlands. 3 sets of archives spell out Prescott Bush's involvement. The first set of files, the Harriman Papers in the Library of Congress, show that Prescott Bush was a director and shareholder of a number of companies involved with Thyssen. Banksters assassinate JFK. When President John F. Kennedy wrote and signed Executive Order 11110 on the 4th of June 1963, which ordered the U.S. Treasury to issue a new public currency, the United States note, he essentially signed his own death warrant. Kennedy's United States notes were not borrowed from the Federal Reserve private bankers but were created by the U.S. government and backed by the silver stockpiles held by the U.S. government. Some $4.5 billion went into public circulation, reducing the interest payments to the Federal Reserve and loosening its control over the nation. 5 months later JFK was assassinated in Dallas, Texas, and his United States notes were pulled from circulation almost immediately and destroyed. John J. McCloy, who was then the president of Chase Manhattan Bank, and president of the World Bank, was appointed to the Warren Commission, to make certain that the banking connection behind the assassination was well concealed from the public. The truth is that the U.S. government, as do many other governments, still has the power under its constitution to issue debt-free money, but the control of the banksters is so severe that our servants, our governments, are not doing what is best for the people. An example of this hit mainstream media for weeks in the U.S. during January 2013, when it was discovered that a loophole could allow the entire U.S. debt to be paid off with a single platinum coin. This coin, dubbed the $1 trillion coin, proved beyond any doubt that the U.S. government had the means and opportunity to settle the country's debt. This was the first time that mainstream media offered their viewers a glimpse of the enormity of the fiat currency deception. This is only a small taste of what the banksters are capable of and how they have manipulated our world for a very long time. It seems that it is up to us, the people, to do something about it. Reference: All wars are bankers' wars, Michael Rivero. Money does not make the world go round. On this long and convoluted path of deception about money, we have become well-trained soldiers marching to the beat of the invisible drum, of the money makers. We have cleverly been fed statements like money makes the world go round and if you work hard, you will make it to the top, and the money buys the whiskey, without ever questioning it for too long. The truth is that the world goes around all by itself, and when you get to the top, it's never quite enough, and while currently it may be the money that buys the whiskey, it is people who make the whiskey and therefore it should be the people and not the money who decide how and by whom the whiskey is consumed. Through subtle indoctrination, money has become the lifeblood of the human psyche. But in fact it is more like a drug and humanity is addicted to it because most of us believe that we cannot survive without money. Well, nothing could be further from the truth. Just open your eyes and look at the world around you. Everything around us exists in abundance and functions without money. We are the only species known to us that has adopted this thing called money. Millions of people around the world create millions of things every day that fill the shelves of supermarkets, warehouses, and showrooms. Millions of farmers around the world produce millions of tons of food every year. Our engineers design the most spectacular structures that take our breath away. Our musicians reduce us to tears of emotion with their performances that move us at the very core of our souls, and our children fill our hearts with joy and the hope for a better life with their innocence. Money does not make the world go around, people do. But for now, there is repeated talk about stimulating the economy, capital injection, job creation, stabilizing business growth, increasing international trade and other such failed actions of the past that have landed us in this mess in the first place. None of what the governments and bankers are proposing are solutions for the people. Their solutions are just further acts of enrichment for the banks and their owners. It is a well-orchestrated and devious maneuver by the banksters that has been called problem-reaction solution. David Icke, banks get bailed out, people pay the debt. The sad thing is that every time the banks get bailed out by the central banks, the people have to pay it back, not the banks. Let me make this very simple for you, there is no magical vault full of money hidden in a secret place. The banking elite have given themselves the right to print money, that is, to create money out of thin air. Just picture this scene. You walk into a printing factory and next to a very expensive printing machine lies a pile of paper that is worth $100. A man comes along and starts feeding the pieces of paper into the printer, which emerge on the other side covered in fancy designs, a logo, a name, and some numbers printed in the corners of the pieces of paper, now worth $100 billion. These papers then get cut and trimmed to look really neat and tidy, wrapped in more fancy paper in bundles of 100 and shipped off to the banks. What you have just witnessed is the creation of money out of thin air by the central banks. These pieces of paper are then loaned out to people for which they have to pay back interest, which amounts to more pieces of paper of a similar nature being obtained by the people to do so. But the people cannot print their own pieces of paper because if they did, they would go to jail for a very long time. Only the bankers have the right to create these fancy papers without getting into trouble with the law because they caused the laws to be written as such to give them these privileges. This is how quickly and simply a global scam can be created if you have the power to write the laws that will enforce the scam. Then you need to be able to control the armies and police through the governments to enforce the laws, and pretty soon you will be untouchable, playing God with everyone around you. There will be those that fiercely defend these acts, arguing that this is how things work and that we need order and structure to be able to function as a civilized society. They will say that it has taken us a long time to get to the pinnacle of civilization where we can all benefit from the luxuries provided by advanced technology. There will be those in the financial sector who will try to explain to you how complicated all of this is and that it's not as simple as that. They have a global army of well-trained accountants and traders who are completely brainwashed into believing they are doing very important work that keeps the world going around. Those are all just lies and deceptions for the banks to hide behind. Do not believe anything they say other than this simple version of the facts. The central banks create money out of thin air, they give it to the government to bail out the banks, and we, the people, have to work longer and harder to pay them back, not with thin air but with our sweat and blood. This is the immaculate deception of humanity. We are the slaves that keep the banksters in power. Let me not mince my words and repeat what I have already stated. The banking industry is the biggest organized crime syndicate that has ever been exposed. But somehow they have managed to make themselves appear to be legitimate and their activities legalized and accepted by the very people they are extorting from. I will expand on the laws that were maliciously created to enslave us in later chapters. Laws that we believe are there to protect us, are actually created to protect the interests of multinational corporations. The muscle behind the bankers, Crown Temple. How do the banking elite control this huge financial monster that seems to be infinitely complex and out of control? How and when did they organize themselves to be so powerful? Where is their head office? Who keeps the wheels turning every minute of every day without any rest? It is known as the Crown. While many assume that the Queen of England is behind this power and that the royal family of Britain own the USA, this is a different crown, established by the infamous Knights Templar, when they built the Temple Church in the city of London in 1185. The crown is also known as the Crown Temple or Crown Templar. Both the governmental and judicial systems within the United States of America, at both federal and local state levels, are owned by the Crown, a private foreign power, whose head office is in the centre of London, England, in a sovereign state known as the City of London. The control of the banking elite and their lawmakers is strategically located inside three independent and sovereign states that exist within other countries and cities, namely, Vatican City in Rome, Washington, D.C., and the City of London. The city is also referred to as the Square Mile, and holds city status in its own right. It is a sovereign and separate ceremonial county. The Temple Church is located between Fleet Street, the financial head office of the City of London, and the Victoria Embankment by the River Thames. Its grounds also house the Crown offices at Crown Office Row. This temple church is outside any canonical jurisdiction. This means that no government or other so-called authority has any control or power over it, just like the Fed in the USA. The master of the temple is appointed and takes his place by sealed, non-public, patent, without induction or institution. The International Bar Association is located at the Inns of Court at Crown Temple, which are physically located at Chancery Lane behind Fleet Street. This is where all bar attorneys find their origins, while all bar associations throughout the world are signatories and franchises to the Crown at this site. The local authority for the City of London Corporation, is unique in the United Kingdom, and has some unusual responsibilities for a local authority in Britain, such as being the police authority for the city. It also has responsibilities and ownerships beyond the city's boundaries. The corporation is headed by the Lord Mayor of the City of London, an office that is separate from, and much older than, the Mayor of London. This is where and how the current global banking and legal systems have laid the foundations for the control and tyranny imposed on humanity today. More than 800 years in the making, meticulously planned and executed, conning and fooling the ignorant people every step of the way. From here they dictate the legal and financial policy for most of the world, which includes the launching of wars and invasions of countries, as a strategic tool of control and the never-ending creation of debt for countries and their people. The USA is not a free and sovereign nation as proclaimed by the federal government. If this were true, the USA, just like virtually all other countries, would not be dictated to by the Crown Temple through its bankers and attorneys. The USA is controlled and manipulated by this private foreign power, and its unlawful federal government is their pawnbroker. The banks or banking elite rule the temple church, and the attorneys carry out their orders by controlling their victims' judiciary. It's a perfect plan for a perfect crime that has been executed meticulously since the building of the temple in 1185, without too many questions being asked, until now. The private Federal Reserve System, which issues fiat U.S. Federal Reserve notes, is financially owned and controlled by the Crown from Switzerland, which is the home and legal origin for the charters of the United Nations, the International Monetary Fund, the World Trade Organization, and most importantly, the Bank of International Settlements. Even Hitler respected the Crown bankers by not bombing Switzerland. The Bank of International Settlements in Basel, Switzerland, controls all the central banks of the G7 nations and far beyond. He who controls the gold, rules the world. All the legalistic scams promoted globally by the exclusive monopoly of the Temple Bar and their bar association franchises come from four inns or temples of court: the Inner Temple, the Middle Temple, Lincoln's Inn, and Gray's Inn. These inns are exclusive and private country clubs, that are in fact secret societies of world power in commerce. They are well established, some having been founded in the early 1200s. Just like all USA-based franchise bar associations, none of the four inns of the temple are incorporated or registered as corporations, for a simple reason: you can't make a claim against a non-entity and a non-being. They are private societies without charters or statutes, and their so-called constitutions are based solely on custom and self-regulation. In other words, they exist as secret societies without a public front door. More important definitions: fealty, fidelity to a lord, faithful adherence of a tenant or vassal to the superior of whom he holds his lands; loyalty. Under the feudal system of tenures, every vassal or tenant was bound to be true and faithful to his lord, and to defend him against all his enemies. This obligation was called his fidelity or fealty, and an oath of fealty was required to be taken by all tenants to their landlords. The tenant was called a liege man, the land, a liege fee, and the superior, liege lord. By swearing to the 1213 Charter in fealty, King John declared that the British English Crown and its possessions at that time, including all future possessions, estates, trusts, charters, letters patent, and land, were forever bound to the Pope and the Roman Church, as the landlord. Some 500 years later, the New England colonies in America became a part of the Crown as a possession and trust named the United States. Alexander Hamilton was one of the many Crown Templars who was called to their bar. He entered King's College, now named Columbia University in New York City, in 1774, which was funded by members of the London King's Inns. In 1777, he became a personal aide and private secretary to George Washington during the American Revolution. In May of 1782, Hamilton began studying law in Albany, New York. This was a 3-year course, which he miraculously completed in only 6 months and was admitted to the New York Bar. The New York Bar Association was and is a franchise of the Crown Temple through the Middle Inn. After a year's service in Congress during the 1782-1783 session, he settled down to legal practice in New York City as Alexander Hamilton, Esq. In February 1784, he wrote the charter for, and became a founding member of, the Bank of New York, the state's first bank. On the 18th of June 1787, at the Federal Convention in Philadelphia, Hamilton delivered a 5-hour speech in which he stated, "An executive for life will be an elective monarch." When all his anti-federalist, New York colleagues withdrew from the convention in protest, he alone signed the Constitution for the United States of America, representing New York State, one of the legal crown states or colonies. We need to pay attention to the play on words here and notice that a lawful state is made up of the people, but a state is a legal entity of the crown, a crown colony. This is an example of the deceptive ways by which the Crown Temple, through the Middle Templars, have taken control of America and many other parts of our world. But the trickery continued when Hamilton laid the foundation of the first federal U.S. Central Bank, as the Secretary of the U.S. Treasury under President Washington. He secured credit loans through crown banks in France and the Netherlands, and increased the power of the federal government over the hoodwinked nation-states of the Union. Americans were fooled into believing that the legal crown colonies comprising New England were independent nation-states. They were, and still are, colonies of the Crown Temple, through letters patent and charters, who have no legal authority to be independent from the rule and order of the Crown Temple. A legal state is a Crown Temple colony. Neither the American people nor the Queen of England own America. The Crown Temple owns America through the deception of those who have sworn their allegiance by oath to the Middle Templar Bar. The Crown bankers and their Middle Templar attorneys rule America through unlawful contracts, unlawful taxes, and contract documents of false equity through debt deceit. This is all strictly enforced by their entirely unlawful, but legal orders, rules, and codes of the Crown Temple Courts, which is the so-called judiciary in the USA. This is because the Crown Temple holds the land titles and estate deeds to all of North America. But the convoluted control continues further down the rabbit hole. The Pope and his Roman Church control the Crown Temple because his knights established it under his orders. Ref. Michael Edward, Ecclesiastic Commonwealth Community, ECC, he who owns the gold controls the world. The Vatican is often said to be the largest owner of gold in the world. And he who controls the gold controls the world. This is why South Africa and Zimbabwe did not escape the attention of the Crown. It is after all where most of the world's gold has come from, and why Paul Kruger became so famous, and why Cecil John Rhodes was sent to claim it for the Crown, and the reason why Great Britain launched the most expensive war it has ever been engaged in, to date, in South Africa. From 1899 to 1902 there were around 470,000 British troops securing the land for the Crown during the South African War, against some 60,000 Boers or farmers, and a similar number of indigenous Africans from various Bantu tribes. This is nearly twice the number of British and US troops that were involved in the Gulf War during 2012. The British had to secure the control of the gold fields for the Crown, no matter what the cost was. And so they did. To achieve this, the British had to go to drastic measures and adopted the scorched earth policy, burning down homes, villages and farms, killing or confiscating livestock and putting thousands of women and children from the Boer farms and Bantu tribes into concentration camps scattered across South Africa. It is estimated that at least 34,000 people died in these camps, but the number is most likely much higher. This was the model that was improved upon by Adolf Hitler in his own version of concentration camps some 40 years later. 8 years after the end of the war, in 1910, the Union of South Africa was established by King George V, and came to an end on the 31st of May 1961, when it became the Republic of South Africa, a corporation. And so the control continues, a different time, a different name, a different leader, slowly rolling from one form of control to the next, all under the ownership of the Crown. What is quite confusing and greatly disturbing is a letter written on the December 16, 1918, by the early leaders of the ANC, African National Congress, to King George V, pledging their allegiance and loyalty. This is an extract of the first part of a lengthy letter. Petition to King George V, from the South African Native National Congress, December 16, 1918, memorial to His Most Gracious Majesty King George V of Great Britain and Ireland, including the Dominions and Colonies, and Emperor of India. May it please your Majesty. 1. We, the chiefs and delegates assembled at Johannesburg, this 16th day of December, 1918, in the special session of the South African Native National Congress, a political body representing the various tribes of the Bantu people in South Africa, record the expression of our satisfaction and thankfulness in the triumph of righteousness in this great war by the victory of the forces of Great Britain, her noble allies, and the United States of America. 2. We beg to convey to Your Majesty our affectionate loyalty and devotion to Your Majesty's person and throne, and the sincerity of our desire that divine blessing and prosperity may attend Your Majesty and all Your Majesty's dominions in the dawn of a better age. 3. We further express the hope and wish that during Your Majesty's reign all races and nations will be treated fairly and with justice, and that there will be no discrimination on account of color or creed, and will enjoy the right of citizenship, freedom, and liberty under your flag. This kind of declaration of allegiance flies in the face of the principles of a liberation movement that should represent the absolute liberation of the people. Liberation from all forms of oppression and control. Especially financial and economic control of the people, which is more accurately defined as slavery. The Crown Templars have many names and many symbols to signify their private temple. One of the best examples hidden in plain sight is the $1 bill of the private Federal Reserve System in the USA, which is nothing more than a Crown banking franchise debt note. The base of the pyramid clearly shows the Roman date for the year 1776, written in Roman numerals MDCCLXXVI. The Roman Latin words Annud coeptis novis ordo seclorum are proudly displayed for all to see. It means announcing the birth of the new order of the world. The year 1776 signifies the birth of the New World Order under the Crown Temple. That is when their American Crown colonies became a chartered government called the United States. The world in protest. There has never been a time like there is now, when the entire world is rapidly rising up in protest against the banksters and the political regimes that increasingly curtail the freedom of their people. By the end of 2012 there were massive protests in virtually every country and thousands of cities all over the world, sparked mainly by the Occupy Wall Street, OWS, initiative. This caused many more protests around the world to flare up against a wide range of burning issues that were affecting people's life. It is an indication that in truth, there is very little being done by the many governments of the world to serve the people who elected them. Based on the extent of these actions, it is estimated that more than 10 million people around the world were involved in protests between 2010 and the end of 2012. As expected, the mainstream media did not report on most of these protests, but rather did their best to play it all down and treat the protesters with the usual ridicule we have become accustomed to. The Occupy Wall Street protest started on September 17, 2011 in Zuccotti Park, New York. By the end of 2011 there had been more than 1,000 Occupy protests around the world. The main issues raised by OWS were social and economic inequality, greed, corruption, and the perceived undue influence of corporations on government, particularly from the financial services sector. It was becoming evident to millions that corporations were the enemies of the people, spearheaded and supported by the banks and the unlawful legal system. The OWS slogan claims that we are the 99%. The Ubuntu movement agrees with this wholeheartedly and reminds people to take this to heart and not be confused, baffled, or intimidated by the 1% that has assumed control of our planet. The only constant in this universe is change, and so will the draconian regime that has enslaved the 99%. Many believe that the so-called upper class is part of the 1%. It should be stressed that the upper class is not the highest class of earners. Because, even if people are perceived to be extremely wealthy, they mostly do not fall into the 1%, and in most cases should not be demonized. The 1% is a very exclusive club, that remains invisible and untouchable to the global population. Protesters were forced out of Zuccotti Park on November 15, 2011. After several unsuccessful attempts to reoccupy the original location, protesters turned their focus to occupying banks, corporate headquarters, board meetings, college and university campuses. The secret government agencies will stop at nothing to spy on its people and use whatever measures to eliminate troublemakers. If they could eliminate Lincoln and JFK, they can do it to anyone. But this only causes more trouble for them in the long run. And so the government made sure that it gathered as much information about the leaders of OWS in the event they had a potential case of treason or terrorism on which to arrest people who stand up for their rights and the rights of others. Proof of this was delivered on December 29, 2012 by Naomi Wolf of The Guardian newspaper, who provided U.S. government with documents which revealed that the FBI and DHS, Department of Homeland Security, had monitored Occupy Wall Street through their Joint Terrorism Task Force despite labeling it a peaceful movement. While we may see it as our right to protest, they see it as a potential threat to the system. A system designed to destroy anything that threatens its own survival. By the time 2012 came to a close, senior stockbrokers, bank executives like Greg Smith, and senior World Bank insiders like Karen Hutz had spilt the beans on the countless criminal activities by the global banking elite. The world in protest. Here is a taste of what escaped most of the mainstream media. This list is only the tip of the iceberg, but it does give us a glimpse of the state of unhappiness of the global population. It does not include actions like the Occupy activity in South Africa and many other protests against various governments of the world. Please refer to the printed book for an extensive list of protests/internet links from countries around the world, as it is too long to recite with the internet links in audio. December 6, 2012. One of the most important protests in South Africa during 2012 was the blocking of toll gates on several major highways, by COSATU, the largest labor union in SA, which is affiliated to the ANC ruling party. They sent a strong message to the government to stop privatizing the roads in South Africa by allowing private consortiums to erect toll gates, preventing the people from traveling freely, extorting money from people unlawfully. This is not the will of the people, and the message was very clear that the actions will not stop until all toll gates are dismantled. Only time will tell how long COSATU will hold out against the ANC government and the influence of the banksters on them. In 1922, Henry Ford made a statement that is beginning to unfold with the awakening of the people and the rise of global consciousness. It's well enough that the people of the nation and the world do not understand our banking and monetary system, for if they did, I believe there would be a revolution before tomorrow morning. Henry Ford 1922. While the Occupy Wall Street action was in full swing, New Scientist and Forbes magazines ran similar articles under the following headlines. Revealed, the capitalist network that runs the world, the 147 companies that control everything. The articles outline the research of three systems theorists at the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology in Zurich, who took a database listing of 37 million companies and investors worldwide, and found that a staggering 43,060 of these were transnational corporations who share ownerships. They built a model of who owns who, and what their revenues are, and mapped out the whole structure of economic power. The research revealed a core of 1318 companies with interlocking ownerships. Each of these had ties to two or more other companies, and on average they were connected to 20 corporations. Although they represented 20% of global operating revenues, the 1318 appeared to collectively own through their shares the majority of the world's large blue-chip and manufacturing corporations, representing a further 60% of global revenues. When the Zurich team untangled the web of ownership even further, they discovered 147 companies at the core of global corporate control. Each of these 147 companies own interlocking stakes of one another, and together they control 40% of the wealth of the global network. Further analysis exposed that a total of 737 control 80% of it all. It should not be surprising that most are financial institutions that include Barclays Bank, Bank of America, J.P. Morgan Chase, Deutsche Bank, Goldman Sachs, Credit Suisse, and other lesser-known brands to the man on the street. Interesting to note that the South African-based insurance group, Old Mutual, is number 30 on this list. Its wealth cannot come from insuring South African households and vehicles. So who and what are they involved in? Previous studies have found that a few transnational corporations own large chunks of the world's economy, but they included only a limited number of companies and omitted indirect ownerships. This was the first real scientific exposure that goes beyond ideology, to accurately identify such a network of power. It combines the mathematics used to model natural systems with comprehensive corporate data, to map ownership among the world's transnational corporations. Reality is so complex, we must move away from dogma, whether it's conspiracy theories or free market, said James Glatfelder, of the research team. Our analysis is reality-based. The top 50 of the 147 companies that run the world. 1. Barclays plc. 2. Capital Group Companies Inc. 3. FMR Corporation. 4. AXA. 5. State Street Corporation. 6. J.P. Morgan Chase & Co. 7. Legal & General Group plc. 8. Vanguard Group Inc. 9. UBS AG. 10. Merrill Lynch & Co. Inc. 11. Wellington Management Co. LLP. 12. Deutsche Bank AG. 13. Franklin Resources Inc. 14. Credit Suisse Group. 15. Walton Enterprises LLC. 16. Bank of New York Mellon Corp. 17. Natixis. 18. Goldman Sachs Group Inc. 19. T. Rowe Price Group Inc. 20. Legg Mason Inc. 21. Morgan Stanley. 22. Mitsubishi UFJ Financial Group Inc. 23. Northern Trust Corporation. 24. Société Générale. 25. Bank of America Corporation. 26. Lloyds TSB Group plc. 27. Invesco plc. 28. Allianz SE 29. TIAA. 30. Old Mutual Public Limited Company. 31. Aviva plc. 32. Schroders plc. 33. Dodge & Cox. 34. Lehman Brothers Holdings Inc. *. 35. Sun Life Financial Inc. 36. Standard Life plc. 37. CNC. 38. Nomura Holdings Inc. 39. The Depository Trust Company. 40. Massachusetts Mutual Life Insurance. 41. Ingrop NV. 42. Brandis Investment Partners LP. 43. Unicredito Italiano SPA. 44. Deposit Insurance Corporation of Japan. 45. Veernaging Aegon. 46. BNP Paribas. 47. Affiliated Managers Group Inc. 48. Resina Holdings Inc. 49. Capital Group International Inc. 50. China Petrochemical Group Company. Global economic collapse is imminent. By the end of 2012, the world had been bombarded by negative sentiments regarding the global economy for well over a decade, and it has not stopped. And as time marches on, daily news headlines are a constant reminder that we are all in deep financial trouble. All we hear about is doom and gloom in the financial sectors of the world and how everybody will have to tighten their belts and work harder. And suddenly, it wasn't only banks that were bailed out, but countries too. Greece, Ireland, Italy, Portugal, Spain, and Cyprus have been bailed out, while other countries have not called it bailouts but received huge loans that really mean the same thing. The more bailouts we see, the more the banking families smile because they have the right to print an unlimited amount of money. And every time they create more money out of thin air to solve our problems, they take more of our land, our passions, and the people become more enslaved to the bankers. How is it possible that the global economy continues to grind along? Why has it not imploded in a spectacular display of financial carnage? By now everyone should be able to recite the answer automatically: the banksters can continue printing money out of thin air for as long as they are alive. They don't seem to mind what the consequences are as long as they keep control of the governments and the masses. To achieve this, they use the police, the army, intelligence agencies, and all the other government bodies at their disposal. Negative growth, a fictional concept. How is it possible that a world with 7 billion people who all work like slaves every day and create something every day, can amount to a negative outcome? Remember that negative numbers are imaginary or theoretical numbers. They don't really exist. In mathematical terms, any number that does not have a square root cannot exist and is purely theoretical. For example, the square root of 9 is 3. But -9 does not have a square root. This simply means that living, breathing human beings cannot create something negative. You can't have negative sex, or eat a negative carrot, or give a negative gift to someone. The word create is an expression of the divine creation that is directly connected to our humanness and our ability to create infinitely as a species, as expressions of the divine creator of all. Humans are not capable of creating negative growth, only fictional entities or corporations can do that using simulated models. This is why we are treated as such by our governments. We are not seen as human beings, we are juristic persons or fictional entities, pieces of paper and straw men represented by our birth certificates 54 and ID numbers, which are instruments and assets of the government corporations, and that is how negative growth is achieved. The fictional entities are creating the negative growth, not human beings. How long do these bankers think that they can fool the people? It is up to us to share this knowledge with everyone. Sooner or later we will reach a critical mass of consciously awake humans and the tipping point, where no amount of money will be enough to solve the financial problems. Once the critical mass of people wake up to the great deception, there will be no turning back. We will face a massive economic meltdown and the collapse of the entire global financial systems. The question we need to ask is, what are we going to do when this happens? The Occupy movement played a key role in igniting the awareness of banker fraud, causing millions of people to start asking questions about the banks. They waved banners like "Jail the bankers," "Eat the bankers," "Bail out the people not the banksters," "Too big to fail," "Too big to jail," and many more. They made millions of people around the world aware that something was dramatically wrong with the banking industry as they called for the closing down of Wall Street. But unfortunately, all that focused Occupy activity only highlighted the problem, it did not present a workable alternative or any realistic solutions. After the fall of Wall Street, a new path of abundance. The question we need to ask is, what are we going to do when it all collapses? What are we going to do if the banks close their doors and the money runs out? Because if we do not have a clear plan for the future, the human race will be in big trouble. Albert Einstein defined insanity as doing the same experiment over and over, expecting different results. This means that we must be insane because we have been going around in circles for more than 6,000 years using the same financial system of money, a system that does not work and has led to continuous conflict and misery among the people. So as the old age drew to a close in 2012 and the new age of consciousness approached, it became clear that the people of the world had had enough of the abuse. This massive global outcry by millions of people sent a strong message to everyone alive today that the time has come to find a brand new system, a new social structure that is different from anything we have ever used as a so-called civilized species. Such a new system will require great vision, great courage, and great determination to free ourselves from those who choose to control us. It will require a paradigm shift in our thinking to achieve what many believe is unachievable, a utopian world of unity and abundance for all. But more than anything else, it will require a new level of unity consciousness by a critical mass of the people of the world. Because we cannot solve our problems if we continue to approach them from the same level of consciousness we currently embrace. So, let us become the seeds of consciousness and create that utopia that we yearn for and that we are born to experience. In Africa, we call it UBUNTU. UBUNTU Contributionism. A new social structure for a new world. A blueprint for human prosperity. Where everyone contributes their natural talents or acquired skills for the greater benefit of all in their community. The beauty of contributionism lies in its simplicity. But because the system is so simple, every bone in our indoctrinated bodies instantly rebels against it, and we tell ourselves that it cannot be so simple, otherwise it would have already been done. 6,000 years of enslavement by money is tough to erase in a flash. So keep your mind completely open, not just half open, and be prepared to entertain new ideas that are completely alien to a sick capitalist society, filled with poisoned minds and poisoned bodies that desperately need to find a cure. Our inalienable rights, human rights. We, the people, have appointed the politicians as our servants to do the best they can for us, the people. But the moment that they are elected, they seem to forget this and start doing as they please, not delivering to the people what the people want. There are always a million excuses. The net result is that the government is not serving the people. The politicians and the government have failed us dramatically on every level. They have betrayed the dreams of millions who include elders of integrity like Gandhi, Nelson Mandela, Martin Luther King, William Wallace, John Lennon, and many others, who dedicated their lives to our freedom. We are all born free on this planet, as living, breathing human beings, with inalienable rights that nobody may take from us. And yet, through a great deception, this is not the case. All our rights are desecrated from the moment our umbilical cord is cut and we take our very first breath. I have to draw a distinction between rights of human beings, and the rights of fictional entities that are created by birth certificates, and represented by identity documents and other official papers that led people to believe they are a name on a piece of paper or an ID number. Such entities are known as juristic persons in legal terms and represent pieces of paper, not flesh and blood human beings. This is a very important concept to understand. Look at your birth certificate and ask yourself these questions. 1. Were you old enough to consent to the document? 2. Did you sign the document? 3. Whose company name appears on the document? 4. Which company official signed the document? 5. Who gave the company permission to create a certificate of ownership over you at your birth? Remember that a certificate indicates ownership, and somebody now claims to have ownership over you through your birth certificate. So let me remind you of our most important inalienable rights, your God-given rights. We are all born free as living, breathing human beings of flesh and blood and infinite soul with inalienable rights. Freedom is not our right, it is a gift from the Divine Creator to each and every one of us, which nobody may violate or challenge in any way. No one, no government, and no corporation may restrict our individual freedom in any way. Within these rights there is a set of 3 common law principles that have stood the test of time and continue to present a foundation of integrity and honor among humanity. These are simply called common law. 1. Do not kill or harm others. 2. Do not steal or take what is not yours. 3. Conduct yourself honorably in all that you do and say. These common law principles are the foundation for all other laws and guidelines we choose to create for our society. If we abide by these, the following rights become enshrined in our culture and allow every human being to live freely or as a part of a community of their choice. The planet and its riches are there to be used by everyone, not for personal gain or the exploitation of others, but for the benefit of everyone in every community and the benefit of all of humanity. 1. The country is there for its people. 2. The land is there for its people. 3. The water is there for the people. 4. The forests are there for the people. 5. The rivers and lakes are there for the people. 6. The gold, the platinum, diamonds, chrome, copper, iron, uranium, tin, aluminum, and all other minerals in the ground are there for the people. 7. The air and the airwaves are there for the people. 8. Everything that grows on the land is there for the people. 9. The beaches, the mountains, and the skies above are there for the people. 10. The animals do not belong to us or anyone else, they belong to the planet and we are their custodians and protectors. 11. Knowledge and wisdom is to be shared by those who attain it with everyone so that everyone can benefit from the collective wisdom. These things do not belong to the politicians, the governments, or any corporation that has unlawfully laid claim to it. The government has stolen the country from its people. The governments and corporations have laid claim to our countries, our lands, our water, our minerals, our plants and animals, the airwaves, the coastlines and oceans, and they continue to make new laws, almost every day, that grant them more and more control over everything imaginable. The only conclusion we can reach from the current situation is that the government and the large corporations have stolen the country, land, from its people. All done quietly through lies and deception, feeding on the ignorance and good nature of the people. It is up to us, the people, to take it back. It is up to us to stop the rapid destruction of our beautiful planet. The earth is our mother, we are only here because of her presence against the infinite backdrop of creation. The soil is sacred, the water is sacred and the air is sacred. And therefore we must honor her and protect her against all harm, and in so doing, we honor the Creator and creation itself. Here is a more detailed breakdown of our rights that have been stolen. Remember that we have appointed the politicians and the government as our servants to do the best they can for us the people, not to take the role of a slave master to enrich themselves and the corporations that keep them in power. The country belongs to its people. If this is the case, why is the government making new laws every week that are not for the benefit of the people, without consulting the people? Why is it that the people seem to have no recourse against the abuse of the government and the powerful multinational corporations that have taken our country as their own? Why do the laws of the country not benefit the people but the corporations? Why are the courts actually just instruments to enforce the agenda of the government and corporations? Why did a Johannesburg High Court judge tell me, this is not a people's court? The land belongs to its people. If this is the case, why is there so much poverty and homelessness? Why are people being evicted from their homes by instruments of the government like the sheriffs and police, who should be protecting and serving the people? How can the government allow the land of the people to be sold to foreign or multinational corporations with no interest to benefit the people but instead use the people as cheap labor for their continued enrichment? Why does the government own so much land, yet denies the people access to land that belongs to the people? The water belongs to the people. Why are people paying for water? How can the government claim the rights to the water of our land and force us to pay for it? How can the government sell our water rights to multinational corporations? Why is the government allowing mining corporations to poison our water? Why are all our dams and rivers not producing electricity? There is enough energy in our dams and rivers to provide all of us with free electricity. The government and suppliers of electricity like Eskom have been lying to the people to keep us enslaved and dependent on them for the supply of electricity. Just so they can keep charging us exorbitant fees for something that belongs to the people. The forests belongs to the people. How can the government sell or rent our land to Sappi and Mondi and other corporations who use the people as slave labor to grow trees and develop other industries on our land without the people getting any reward from any of these activities? While SA is one of the largest forestry areas in the world, we cannot afford wood for housing and wooden furniture. We cannot afford the paper for our children in school while we have some of the largest paper mills in the world. There is enough wood in SA for everyone to have a beautiful home. The government has failed us dramatically and continues to do so more and more as the years roll by. The rivers, lakes, and the oceans belong to the people. Why have fishermen been denied the right to fish for their families or communities, while large foreign fishing trawlers are given all the rights they need to deplete our coastlines of fish? All rights must immediately revert to all coastal communities to fish for themselves and provide for themselves and other communities with food from the sea. This must be accompanied by breeding, farming, and repopulating efforts to re-energize the oceans around our country to keep them healthy and in harmony with us. All rivers must be monitored and used for the benefit of the communities to also breed fish and other produce attainable by correctly managing our water resources. We will use the oceans and rivers for traveling and transporting whatever we need to serve the people. The gold, the platinum, chrome, copper, iron, uranium, tin, aluminum, and all other minerals in the ground belong to the people. If this is the case, why is there so much poverty in our land? For several hundred years the mineral wealth of South Africa has been stolen by our government. They have granted large multinational corporations the rights to the minerals in our ground. They use the people of the land as their slaves and as cheap labor, rewarding us with worthless fiat paper money. The people have been displaced, used, abused, and exploited for as long as they are needed and then discarded like worthless rubbish, once the needs of the mining companies have been met. This goes on today more than ever before. The greedy multinational corporations are mining and destroying our beautiful land more than ever before. None of this immense wealth is seen by the people. It all goes into the coffers of the corporations to strengthen their grip on controlling the mining operations. This cannot be allowed to continue. The coal belongs to the people. If the coal belongs to the people, why are we paying for electricity and why are we paying for petrol created by Sasol? South Africa is the fifth largest coal exporter on this planet. What do the people get in return? The rights to our coal have been given to multinational corporations to export for their own gain and profit, while most ordinary South Africans can hardly afford the price of electricity and petrol. The diamonds belong to the people. Why have large parts of the country been closed off to us, the people? We are denied access to these restricted zones because of the sheer abundance of diamonds on the ground. Why is this so, if the diamonds belong to the people? People who are desperate to survive are being killed in illegal diamond trade because all the rights to mine and trade in diamonds are fiercely guarded by a few families. It is a well-kept secret that diamonds are superconductors that are used in advanced technology and the generation of free energy. Our scientists must be given all the support they need from the people and the wealth of the country to develop these energies, using the diamonds that belong to the people, and also in many other applications that have been kept secret from the people. Everything that grows on the land belongs to the people. Why are certain plants that are part of the divine creation being banned by our governments, while others that are deadly and poisonous are of no concern to them? How dare they suggest that God makes mistakes? Why are traditional healers being marginalized and many of the plants they have used for thousands of years are being banned? It is clear that the government has a hidden agenda beyond common logic and contrary to the will of the people. Why are natural herbs and treatments being prohibited in favor of dangerous drugs created in laboratories by international pharmaceutical corporations? The skies above and the airwaves belong to the people. Why are people prevented from starting their own radio and TV stations? Why has the government claimed the right to restrict the use of radio waves and given these rights to a handful of powerful multinational corporations that use them predominantly to disseminate disinformation with no intention to benefit the people? These things do not belong to the government and are not the exclusive property of a few corporations. Broadcasting and telecommunication frequencies are part of Mother Nature, like air, and should be free for all to use for the benefit of the people. The wildlife, animals, and plants do not belong to us or anyone else, they belong to the planet and we are their custodians and protectors. Why have wild animals been hunted into oblivion from our lands? Why have we been denied access to the lands where wild animals roam? Why have large parts of the land been turned into national parks where people may not enter without paying or a permit? Why are many of these pristine parts being sold to mining corporations, to create dams and other activities that only benefit the governments and their corporations? The land belongs to the people. The ordinary people who struggle to survive cannot afford to visit the game parks and are in essence restricted from interacting with the indigenous animals of our land. The management of our animals and nature parks needs to be returned to the people who care about the land and the animals that live on it. Let me repeat this statement again because it really needs to sink in. The government has stolen the country, land, from its people. How can we prove this? Our countries are registered as corporations. All of this only begins to truly sink in and make sense once we see that our countries are registered as corporations. A quick search on the U.S. Securities and Exchange website provides the evidence. And what do listed corporations do? They trade their assets, including their citizens, on the global stock markets. But it does not stop there. The registrations of companies extend into states, provinces, cities, government departments, and even the governments themselves that are registered as corporations. The whole world around us and everything we hold dear, has been tuned into corporate assets, owned and controlled by some corporation somewhere, ultimately controlled by the elite banking families whose royal bloodlines go back thousands of years. Below is an extract from the U.S. Securities and Exchange website showing South Africa listed among some of the other large corporations that are well known to the people. Nobody would have expected to find their country listed as a company next to Old Mutual, Anglo-American or Standard Bank. Yet there it is. Take note that the names of the corporations are written in capital letters. This is also the case on your birth certificate, driver's license, passport, ID document, and other official documents. All official correspondence we receive displays our names in capitals, indicating that it is addressed to the corporation called Michael Tellinger. Official tombstones follow the same rules. This is not by accident, but because of what I highlighted before, regarding newborn babies becoming juristic persons and legal fictions the moment a birth certificate is signed. The government and all their corporate subsidiaries that operate under the authority of the government, see people as little corporations or legal fictions, or juristic persons or even natural persons, and specifically property, under the control and the authority of the government. This notion is highlighted in the British Cestui Que Trust Act of 1666. The Act describes the setup of a trust where people who are lost at sea, would have to prove that they are not dead within 7 years. However, it includes the notion that it's not just for those people who are lost at sea, but for all people. Therefore, all people are declared legally dead until proven otherwise. This is why the system believes we are dead, and does not see living people, it only sees administrators, trustees, of a trust. And any administrator, trustee, who receives benefits from a trust, must pay a fee or tax for using such a benefit. This is why we pay taxes, etc., because our income does not come to us, it comes into the trust which we are administering. That trust is our name in capital letters, represented by a special certificate, our birth certificate. A good example of this can be seen in the movie Castaway, where Tom Hanks plays a guy who is stranded on an island for 5 years. After being rescued and returning to his hometown, his friends rally around him with excitement and disbelief that he could have survived for so long on his own. In his absence, however, he was declared dead so that the government could benefit from his estate. In a strange scene that has no real impact on the movie other than exposing our status as fictional entities, one of his friends excitedly turns to Tom saying, "Tomorrow we bring you back to life." Clearly Tom is not dead, he is standing and conversing with his friends, and yet they have to bring his straw man or juristic person back to life. This is so that Tom could carry on paying taxes and be controlled by the state. If he continued to walk around while being declared dead, the state would have no control over his flesh and blood human being body and could not benefit from him in any way. When you are asked to confirm your ID number by an official of the government or bank, you unwittingly admit that you are that special piece of paper which is marked by that ID number. You are acting on behalf of the legal fiction, representing your legal entity and not standing your ground as a living breathing human being, which is not the same thing as a piece of paper. More about this under the Laws That Enslave Us chapter. Below is the front page of the annual report for the corporation called Republic of South Africa from the same U.S. Securities and Exchange website, dated January 9, 2012.